Hi everyone, it's Lauren and this is part 2 of my December reading wrap up. As some of you may know, I've been working with the Costa Book Awards over the past month. So all of the books I'm going to feature in this video were shortlisted for the Costa Novel Award. So I've already read and reviewed the books that are shortlisted for the Costa First Novel Award, so you can watch that here and it'll be linked in the description box below if you're interested in that. But let's get on to these books. Before I jump into the individual reviews, I will say that I enjoyed all 4 of these books immensely. Like, they're very different, but all of them were so readable. So I think this was a really interesting experience and I would actually recommend all of them. So that's a good start. The first book I have here I read a little while ago, but I'm going to include it again as part of this video briefly, and that is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. This book is about 3 people, Ellis, Michael and Annie, and it's about their relationship, both friendship and romantic relationship between all 3 of them, kind of as they are growing up and changing. And it's a very quiet novel. It's quite interesting. It's about the nature of love and kind of friendship and attachment and what that is. And the emotion in this book is very intense, it's very strong, but the book itself portrays that quite subtly, and all of the emotions are very internal. Not many of them are displayed openly, which makes for quite an interesting read. It also touches on some other topics such as the AIDS crisis. So overall, a very beautiful and moving read, and a very gentle handling of its characters and of its subject matter. So I would very much recommend this. I'll go through these in the order in which I read them. So the next one that I have for you is Homefire by Camilla Shamsi. This book is a modern day retelling of the Greek tragedy Antigone. I haven't read or seen, I think I might have seen a production of it at uni actually, but I certainly don't remember the story of Antigone, so I can't comment on how close this is to the original tale. But in this story we have sisters Isma and Anika's twin brother Parvez, and they are British Muslims who are living under the shadow of their father having died when they were children. He died on his way to Guantanamo Bay, having lived a lot of their lives abroad overseas as part of various jihadi wars. And at the opening of this book, their brother Parvez has fled home to join ISIS in Syria. Other characters we have in this book is the Home Secretary of the UK, who is Muslim, and his son Ayman, who develops friendships and relationships with Anika and Isma, and it's kind of about this difficult, very complicated situation that they find themselves in as a family. But then in a more broader sense, it's also about the nature of being Muslim, being of Pakistani heritage, descent, but also being British and how you navigate that as part of this modern society. And what this book manages to do as part of the overall plot is look at lots of different people's opinions and viewpoints on how it is possible to survive or get by as a Muslim as part of modern day British society. And the book itself doesn't judge whether something's right or wrong or what it should be. It just kind of examines and presents lots of different opinions, which I really liked, because especially apart from that, and that being an interesting topic for a book, it's also so well written and I really enjoyed reading it and I found it completely engaging. I have heard some comments on this book that the ending is quite melodramatic or goes a little bit too far. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think perhaps it does reach its climax at quite an accelerated speed, and at the end a lot of things happen at once. But this is a Greek tragedy, and I don't think you can really blame a Greek tragedy for having an element of the melodramatic in it, because I think if you're going to do a modern day retelling, you're going to be confined somewhat to the structure of the original story. But that is really a minor concern, and overall my experience of this book was very enjoyable indeed, so I would highly recommend this. Next up we have Reservoir 13 by John McGregor, and the style in which this book is written is very different from the other 3 in this shortlist. Well, they're all different from each other really, but it's also a style that I think I've rarely come across, and that is a complete ensemble of characters and each one is treated fairly equally. So Reservoir 13 tells the story of a 13-year-old girl, Becky, who goes missing one day when her parents are in this village in the north of England for Christmas, and she's never found. So she's gone missing, and that tragedy affects her family, but we don't really ever hear from the family's point of view. what we look at in this book is how that tragedy then shapes and affects all of the residents of this village. And each chapter is a new year, and as the years go by, you see all the children grow and change, their relationships with each other change, people moving away, people joining the village. And it's a really interesting look at how big events shape people and shape lives, but also about the smaller events and how they all interlink, and how some of them can actually have a bigger, long-lasting effect than some of the seemingly big stuff. In the first couple of chapters, I will say it's a little bit difficult to follow what's going on, because the book, the voice in this book is completely neutral, and it just kind of presents this village without comment and without you really getting behind a lot of the emotions and motives of the individual characters. It just kind of presents them, and in the first chapter it jumps between all of these different people in the village, and for a while it is difficult to kind of see what's going on, but after a little bit you just get into the flow of it, and you just really come to know this whole village, and the village as a character in itself really, and how all of these different people interlink. And it's a very interesting effect because you see time go past so quickly, and you really get a sense of the beauty of life and community and how people grow and change as they go through different stages in their life. And I just really enjoyed it. It's not like anything I don't think I've ever read, and I really enjoyed the way he kind of elevated normal everyday life and make that the story rather than the disappearance being the main focus of the novel. And finally, on the shortlist, we have Under a Pole Star by Steph Penny. This is a historical fiction book, and it's about two different expeditions to the Arctic Circle, one by Flora, who is a Scottish woman, and then another that includes Jacob, who is from the United States, and it's about them meeting in Greenland in the 1890s, when people are still trying to understand Inuit life and trying to discover the North Pole and chart all the different territory, and people are also there for scientific reasons as well. So it's quite an interesting one. This is not a book at all that I would have picked up going by the cover or going by the description. I'm not a huge historical fiction fan. I'm not all that interested in exploration, adventure type books, but I very much enjoyed this. I think, like all of the other three as well, this book is immensely readable, and even though it's quite long, and I will be honest, I'm about 100 pages from the end, so I haven't quite finished it. I don't know if you can see where I am, but this is like 600 pages long, and you know, despite its length, I've really kind of whizzed through it. I found the descriptions of the Arctic landscape very interesting, and how these people from different societies and different cultures kind of meet. I enjoyed all the backstory about what's going on with the characters back in New York and back in London, and then the main crux of this book is about the relationship between Jacob and Flora as well, so we've kind of got a little bit of romance. There's quite a lot going on in this book. I think if I had one criticism, it would be that it probably is slightly too long in parts, and that maybe makes the pacing go off a little bit. I think she lingers in certain aspects a little bit too long, which I can't explain, obviously, without ruining the book. Obviously, I haven't quite got to the end yet, so I don't really expect that my feelings will dramatically change on this book, but there could be something that I'm missing right in the last few pages. But despite that, I think it's an immense effort. I think it's really interesting how much information she's got in there. I particularly enjoyed all the discussion about the different stars and using the stars for navigation. But considering I went into it with that preconception that I probably wouldn't like it as much, it's done a very good job of turning me round. So overall, a really, really strong shortlist. And I think if you've thought that any of these books would pique your interest at all, I would highly recommend you picking them up. Probably for me, if I was going to pick a winner, and the winners are announced tomorrow on the 2nd of January, I think my favourite in this shortlist is probably Homefire, because I just loved it. As I was reading it, I was just completely sucked in, and I think there's so many interesting comments on modern day society in here, wrapped up in a very, very enjoyable book. So I think this might just edge it as my favourite. But I have to say, I'm thoroughly impressed with all four of them. I don't envy the judges making a decision between these four books, and I think I said something similar with the first novel category as well, is that I love that this shortlist is so varied, and each of the four books brings something really different to the table, because I think that's going to appeal to a wide range of readers, which is the point in part of prizes, I think. So I think that's fantastic, but then it means it's quite difficult to pick a winner because you're not really comparing apples with apples. So yeah, I don't know which one I think would win. I'd love to hear from you if you've read any of these books. Some of these have been quite around in the public eye for a while now, so hopefully some of you have read them. I'd love to know which one you think is going to win, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!